Good evening, sir, and good evening to all the participants who are present here. This is Anika Sharma. I am working as an external manager with Amicus Curie from the last few months, and today I am here to introduce Sir. He is a retired justice from Madhya Pradesh High Court. He even worked as an advocate at Madhya Pradesh High Court for around 32 years in all sides, whether it be constitutional matters, civil services, arbitration and company matters, and many more. And even he has been a guest lecturer in the Jabalpur University of Law Department and worked as a government advocate for around 5 years. He was even an standing counsel for the Election Commission for a period of 10 years and represented various corporations, universities, authorities of the state and Union of India. He is presently working as an arbitrator in the cases referred by the Supreme Court and High Court and is designated as a senior counsel by the Supreme Court of India. And in the year 2017, he has been appointed by the President as the Vice Chairman of Authority for Advanced Rulings for the period of 3 years. And today I'm very grateful and honored to welcome Sir to this National Conference on Arbitration Law, and I hope you'll enjoy this conference. Now, I would like Sir to take over.
Good evening, everyone. I think I am audible. Everybody is hearing me.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. Today's subject is very interesting. And first of all, I'll thank all the participants as also the organizers who have organized this video conference for learning in the fields of law in these hard days when everything is shut down or virtually not in a proper working mode. What I feel, the learning is something which can still go on by various means, by listening to the persons who have experienced something in the life, mostly in the field of law, and also going through the books available on the subject. I'll talk about the arbitration because this what I feel is the most acceptable um, solution to get the redressal, faster relief in the matters of dispute in the contractual matters. So when I was asked whether I would like to speak on uh, any particular subject, I suggested that arbitration is the field in which I am working presently, and I have experience in last 4 5 years that this is a growing field in the law. Other than the disputes or the litigation which is going in the court, there are companies, the contractors, and many others, they prefer the arbitration because what they feel is this alternative mode of redressal is more faster than the system which is going on nowadays. So we'll start pondering on this subject. See, the arbitration is not new in India. If we examine the very beginning of our the arbitration was very much there in the shape of reference made to someone on whom the persons have the trust. In case of a dispute, for a resolution. So this was going on for so many years. Later on, the village panchayats, etc., the forum in this was created by the society, and this is how the arbitration was, in fact, in the very roots of our society. I am referring to the domestic Indian arbitration. Why? Because it has been adopted by other cultures, other societies, and now it has become internationally known. See, the law relating to arbitration was codified in India in 1940. There was so many things provided in that act, but by passage of time, it was felt that they need an improvement, certain corrections are required, and therefore, in 1996, the present Arbitration and Conciliation Act was enacted. Now, what is the difference between the two? Because if we want to understand the basic of present law, we must know what was the law prior to this, and what are the changes, and what is the importance of the present law. See, in 1940 Act, provisions were there. Most of the provisions are still adopted in the present law, but the basic difference between the two is the two enactment is that previous law was not making the arbitration award or arbitral award an authority of the court. It was to be made the rule of the court. Sorry. And proceedings were to be done in that respect, which also consumed the same time as the trial, normal trial. So the change which is made is now, you can see, if an arbitral award is passed and if it is not challenged under section 36 of the present act, it becomes a decree of the court and is to be executed like a decree. Therefore, there is no need to make it a rule of law. This is the basic difference, and that is why the concept of the present Arbitration Act is to be understood. Now we'll take up one by one the effect and the basic requirement of the law. Arbitration Act itself would not be applicable in case there is no arbitration agreement. And if you see the definition of the arbitration agreement as given in section 2, subsection E, sorry, subsection B, it only refers to section 7 of the Act, where the arbitration agreement in chapter 2 is provided. Now, what is the arbitration agreement? The simple meaning which is given is an arbitration agreement means an agreement by the parties to submit to arbitration all or certain disputes which have arisen on which or which may arise between them in respect of a defined legal relationship, whether contractual or not. Now, if we go to subsection 2, it is the arbitration agreement may be in the form of an arbitration clause. what we have to understand is whether merely making a clause in agreement or in a contract, will it fulfill the requirement of arbitration agreement or not? Or will it be satisfactorily applicable in the arbitration cases? And why it is important? Unless there is an arbitration agreement, the act itself would not be applicable. The act is that act become applicable only if there is an arbitration agreement. And to adjust what is in fact the arbitration agreement, entire section 7 will not give you any idea. Then we have to go to the laws. What are the settled principles which have been given? What has been defined as an arbitration agreement? See, the difference between the clause and the agreement is clause may be reciting anything which may refer to the arbitration act, but not necessarily it will amount to an arbitration agreement unless it is in definite terms that in case of a dispute, the matter will be referred to an arbitration and only to an arbitration. And this is what the basic requirement. You will have to find out first that the agreement written or the clause made in an agreement containing the arbitration is in fact an arbitration agreement or not. In the one of the cases, this has been explained by the apex court. In the case of Jagdish Chandar versus Ramesh Chandar, this is 2007 5 SCC 719. In para 8 and 9, the apex court has very categorically let down what should be the meaning of an arbitration agreement. See, I'll have the text, but I'll not read it as a whole because it will take a lot of time. Considering the previous law, the Supreme Court has said the intention of the parties to enter into an arbitration agreement shall have to be gathered from the terms of the agreement. If the terms of the agreement clearly indicate an intention on the part of the parties to the agreement to refer their dispute to a private tribunal for adjudication and a willingness to be bound by the decision of such tribunal on such dispute, it is arbitration agreement. Therefore, the first and foremost requirement is that there should be a free, willing agreement, and the agreement should be absolute. It should not include any, it should not be laden with any if, but, and lekin, kintu, parantu, nothing of that sort. It should be definite, the conclusive. And why I say so? I have experienced such a case. In a case, I'll give you an example to understand what will happen to the litigant in case we commit a mistake in adjudging whether there is an arbitration agreement or not. There was a partnership form and it has an agreement which contained an arbitration clause. There was a dispute, so one of the partner filed a suit. Now in this suit, he himself made an application for referring the matter to the arbitration, saying that there is an arbitration clause. That was opposed by the defendant, and ultimately that application was rejected. Now, The matter went on. After recording the entire evidence, after giving the findings, though the court reached to the conclusion that the plaintiff was entitled to the relief claim, yet it held that since there is an arbitration agreement, there is an arbitration clause which passed the civil suit, therefore the suit is dismissed. Now that man rushed to the High Court, made an application for appointment of arbitrator, and then the arbitration reference was made to the arbitrator. Matter came, the arbitrator examined and found that there was no arbitration agreement between the parties, because what was recited in the clause of agreement was that in case of a dispute, the party will decide the same amicably by mutual consent, and in case of failure, they may refer it to the arbitration. So, first and foremost thing which is required is that it should be absolute arbitration and nothing else. That was missing. The tribunal reached to the conclusion that since there is no arbitration agreement, the reference cannot be made. Ultimately returned back the reference, rejected the claim, saying that the parties may have other remedies available, but they cannot come before the arbitrator. So now this is the situation which we have to examine, and we have to be sure whether there is an arbitration agreement or not. What will happen to that poor fellow who has fought all the way in the civil court, got a favorable finding but no result? Ultimately went to the High Court, where also he was not properly guided, because the people could not understand the validity of the clause and the difference between the clause and the agreement. The result was, again he has to go back. So now this keeping in mind these situations, one has to be very much firm to first examine whether there is an arbitration agreement or not. Therefore, what I would suggest, the young people have to go through this law, which I have just now referred, Jagdish Chandra's case, examine, understand the agreement, then only to proceed, whether to go before the arbitration or the remedies available under the civil law. See, the Arbitration Act would not only be applicable if there is an arbitration agreement, but it will also create a bar. In other jurisdictions, the civil court's jurisdiction would not be available. And so many things, so many other proceedings cannot be done under the other acts, because only the Arbitration Act would be applicable. Now, what I feel, whether I should say or not, this is the primary requirement of the judge also. Whenever an application is made, even under Section 11, the judge is required to see whether there is an arbitration agreement in true sense or not. In case there is no arbitration agreement between the parties, as is required under the law, the act itself would not be applicable. The judge will not have any power under Section 11, though made under the scheme of the act or whatever, to appoint an arbitrator or to make a reference. So this is first which we have to understand. Now, I have suggested that this is such a big subject which cannot be completed in one sitting or one spell. So I'll cut down certain few provisions and then the other parts which I have suggested to be added in this, of course, on account of my own experience in working in arbitration, I'll take up those two things, pleadings and production of evidence before the arbitrator, arbitral tribunal. Now, to reach to such a place or to start with such a fact, we have to see certain more provisions and to keep in mind the entire scheme of the Act as is made in 1996 and as amended in 2015 and onward. There is one more thing which you have to keep in mind, that is the interim measures by the court while the arbitration proceedings are not started. That is section 9. And in case of emergency or in the dire need for protection purposes, you can exercise this option by seeking relief from the principal court. Now, you will have to see what is the principal court. That is precisely defined in section 2E, small e, where it is said that the court having the original civil jurisdiction, and few of our high courts have the original civil jurisdiction. So barring for those high courts which have the original jurisdiction, the principal civil court would mean the civil court of the area where the dispute has arisen, having competent jurisdiction to look into that matter. Now, since commercial courts have been formed in India, the jurisdiction would be with the commercial court and they will have to be treated as principal original courts. So if need be, you have to apply under section 9 before that court, not rush to the high court straightway in case the high court has no original jurisdiction, to seek a remedy immediately under section 9. Section 11 is simple, that is for appointment of, so we will skip it, appointment of arbitrator. We will now come to the provisions of section 19, where the determination of rule and procedure of the arbitration is prescribed. Why I am referring this? Because this will be important for the other two parts of the lectures today. The arbitral tribunal shall not be bound by the Code of Civil Procedure first, or the Indian Evidence Act, both. Now, subject to this part, the parties are free to agree on the procedure to be followed by the arbitral tribunal in conducting its proceedings. So this has to be done, of course, with the aid of the lawyers. Parties may not be aware of what are the proceedings, how the things are to be done, how the claims would be proved or defense would be put forward. So here the help is to be from the lawyers, and they should know what are the constraints under the law and how they have to evolve a procedure, suggest a procedure to the arbitral tribunal to conclude the proceedings within the limitation prescribed under the Act. See, Section 29 to Section 29A has been added and it has been amended recently also. What is the provision of this? It is a time limit for arbitral award. The proceedings are to be done within the time stipulated in the provisions of this Act. It is not that indefinite period is available to the arbitral tribunal to conclude the proceeding and to make an award. So one has to formulate a procedure so that efficaciously, smoothly, and properly the claims are placed and proved. So for that purpose, the importance of Section 19 is there. You have to understand Section 29A and Section 23. Section 19 is to be, the procedure under Section 19 is to be agreed in these terms. Now, see, Section 19 says CPC would not be applicable. Then how you have to place your case before the tribunal and how it has to be treated as an evidence itself without further recording of evidence. And why I say so, I'll explain. See Section 23 of the Act prescribed within the period of time agreed upon by the parties or determined by the arbitral tribunal, the claimant shall state the facts supporting his claim, the points at issue, and the relief or remedy sought. And the respondent shall state his defense in respect of these particulars, unless the parties have otherwise agreed as to the required element of those statements. Now see, why this has to be interpreted, this has to be understood properly. Merely by saying everything is not to be treated as proof. One has to not only state, but has to prove also. Since the Evidence Act is also not applicable, what would be the mode of producing the evidence? How the evidence would be produced? Because as I stated on the beginning of the lecture, the importance of now under the new act is different than what it was prior to 1996. It was not treated as a decree of the court in the earlier law, but now it has become a decree of the law, a decree of the court in terms of the law. In case of a dispute, if a finding is given, of course it is challengeable, but if suppose it is not challenged, then what? It becomes executable like a decree. And since it becomes executable like a decree, it has to be passed in the same manner as if a decree of the court is passed. And for that purpose, the evidence is also required, the pleadings are required, and so many things are required to be seen. The conduct of the trial itself is to be done in the same manner, or at least satisfying the basic requirement of those trials, and then only to give an award. So for that, room is not that long available in the entire system. Therefore, what you have to do is You have to make a concise statement of your claims coupled with whatever relevant evidence is available. And since it is open to the parties under Section 19 to agree to such a proceeding or such a procedure, they may agree that entire pleadings and evidence would be produced on affidavit. There are two things which are important. One, a contract matter requires to be done in the writing. Everything is in writing. Nothing is oral. In a company contract, you will find everything is in writing. Even the correspondence done in respect to that contract is in writing. No verbal discussion, no verbal instructions. When everything is in writing, why not to produce such an evidence, such a writing on an affidavit so that it becomes an evidence itself, becomes it before the tribunal. The same thing is in respect of pleadings. You have to go through the entire agreement. You have to examine each and every clause. You have to test what are your liability and what are the liabilities of the respondent or the employer. And in case you come to the conclusion that yes, these are the breaches on account of which you could not complete the time, the work within time, or there was any hurdle on your way to complete the work, you can very well point out those circumstances, explain them, show the agreement itself, produce it, and then in a case you succeed in demonstrating that the breaches were on the part of the other side, you will get the relief. So this is how the pleadings are to be done. I'll give you an example. In one of the cases, a party came before and said that the party was very much willing and ready to execute the work, contracted work. But the other side committed the defaults on account of which completed within time. Except this statement, there was nothing to demonstrate what was the requirement, the need of the contract and what preparations were done by the other side for execution of that work. In a building contract, one can see what are the requirements, how much labor is required, how much material is to be obtained within the time stipulated. If the contract is to be completed, this will be the requirement, and the claimant has to demonstrate in the pleading specifically that these were the requirements which after foreseeing arrangements were made in this manner so that the work is done within the time stipulated. Now, if you simply say that you were willing and ready to, that will put you nowhere. You will not be able to get a relief on the basis of these bald pleadings, unless everything is explained. So what my feeling is that while determining the rules and the procedure, these facts are to be kept in mind, and then agreement has to be given for adopting a particular procedure and to make the pleadings in that manner. See, after amendment in section 23 in the year 2019, now 6 months period is further available for making the pleadings of the parties. So for that purposes also, since the time is separately allowed, the pleadings are to be made very carefully, keeping in mind each and every clause, the requirement of that clause, the action taken by the party concerned, and explaining every such thing in the and of course it should be on affidavit. Therefore, it become the evidence itself. Now, another part, vice versa, is there. It's not necessary that every lawyer should be on only from the claimant side. For the respondent or for the employer, the law available is that at the time of statement of defense, a counter claim can also be made. And you have to keep it in mind that it is not necessary that for a counter claim, the reference must be made to the court or a notice must have been given and then only a claim would be made. No, because it is provided in the act itself that in the respondent in support of his case may also submit a counter claim. This is subsection 2A added in section 23, and therefore the respondent has to not only reply to whatever defense, whatever statement of claim is produced, be giving his defense, and then only he will have to say his counterclaim. He has to explain his claim, the losses suffered by, and then uh, objections regarding claims are to be set out separately, and the counterclaim is to be established separately. Now, we'll examine the other part, production of evidence. As I have just now pointed out to you, Evidence Act is not applicable. There is a mode of evidence recording before the tribunal. The time limit is there. All right. The assistance from the court can be taken. Now, suppose there is requirement of recording oral evidence. That arbitrator may not be in a position to record the evidence himself. Arbitral tribunals sometimes may not don't have the facilities of recording evidence, and as I don't have such facilities. So what are the assistance are given under the Act? Section 23(7) says, court's assistance in taking evidence. The arbitral tribunal or a party with the approval of the arbitral tribunal may apply to the court for assistance in taking evidence. अब हम suppose the application is made before the tribunal, before the court for recording of evidence. In India, the system is much or less same everywhere. In every state, the situation is this, that the lower judiciary is burdened with the pendency of the cases. If they are not capable of completing their own work, how will they be in a position to assist an arbitral tribunal by recording the evidence and giving back the recorded evidence to the tribunal to proceed further? So, cut down such a situation, what procedure I have adopted is, and what I have suggested that it should be adopted normally. See, every contract is in writing, everything is done in writing. Therefore, you can file the documents on affidavits. The other side may also file their document. You may give a list of admission and denial as is prescribed under Order 11 and 12 of the Code of Civil Procedure, though it is not specifically applicable. But by adopting a procedure, you can make it applicable. There's no bar under the Act that the Civil Procedure Code or its provisions or its procedure cannot be adopted in arbitral proceedings. They can very well be adopted. The other aspect is, while giving the document on a evidence, you can serve a notice to admit documents. Even you can give the interrogatories which are required to be answered on affidavit. Once something stated on the oath is given to the tribunal, it becomes the evidence. What is the purpose of recording of oral evidence? Asking certain questions relating to documents or proving the documents. If the other mode of proving the document or giving effect of evidence to those documents can be adopted, why not to go for that? That will curtail the recording of the evidence. And once this is done, the work can be completed within the time stipulated under Section 29A of the Act. 6 months period for the purposes of pleadings as given under Section 23(4) of the Act after amendment. Thereafter, the period of 1 year to conclude the proceedings as provided under Section 29A, subsection 1, start from the date the period of 6 months of completing the pleading is over. In case the proceedings could not be completed within the period of 1 year, the party with consent under subsection 3 of Section 29A further extend the period for 6 months. So now it will become a total period of 24 months from the day one. The reference is made to the tribunal to conclude the proceeding and to make an award. So basic of the arbitration is the agreement. First and foremost, examination of arbitration clause to find out whether there is an agreement or not, work arbitration agreement or not, in true sense. Second, requirement of any interim protection, whether it is needed or not, and if so, to go before the court under Section 9. Of course, after the arbitration proceedings are initiated and the arbitral tribunal is instituted, Section 70 will come to assistance in the same manner for the grant of interim relief. 3, the procedure to be adopted as to satisfy the time limit prescribed under section 29A, and then the pleadings in definite terms, so that the crux of your claim are before the tribunal. Reply is also in the same manner, and then counterclaim, if any, is required to be done in the same manner. Recording of evidence or production of evidence, as I have explained, the best way in the form of affidavits with the assistance of Order 11 and 12 of the Code of Procedure, or the procedure as prescribed under Order 11 and 12 of the Code of Procedure, Civil Procedure. Now, before concluding, I'll say one more thing. What I have feel, what I have experienced is that arbitration proceedings are taken so lightly. Sometimes the claims are made as if the claims in motor vehicle accident claims cases are being made. I'll suggest this is not proper. Why? There's no prescribed fees for conducting an arbitration proceedings. But Section 1114 prescribe how the arbitral tribunal will charge the fees. And Schedule 4 is also made in the Act. Now there is a provision which prescribe that the fees chargeable would be in terms of the sum in dispute. And Section 38 of the Act says that the sum in the deposit in reference to the entire arbitral proceeding would be different for the claim and counterclaim. The deposit here refers to the fees payable, cost to be deposited by the parties. Now, if these hypothetical claims are made in crores, which the party is not capable of proving, the very purpose would be frustrated because the party will not get the adequate relief in that relation. Secondly, the party would be burdened by payment of fees because the sum in dispute is the sum which is stated in the statement of claim or counterclaim, and on the basis of that the amount of fees is calculated. So instead of making hypothetical claims, strict calculated claims should be made so that not only the party get the adequate relief, but is also not required to pay unnecessary. So this is what I would like to suggest for this session. For the next, if any opportunities would be there, I'll further talk about other aspects of the arbitration, and of course in relation to the other laws. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So anybody is having any questions, so they can write it in the chat box. Please. I hope after such long session, you might be having at least one or two questions related to arbitration. Yes, Harshika, what's the question? You have a question regarding international arbitral proceedings. What
See,
is the question?
I would like to say I have not worked on the international side, so it will not be possible for me to answer immediately. But of course, international arbitration, except for the procedural difference, nothing more differences should be there. This is what I feel.
He's asking how is foreign arbitral award is executed in India.
See, the procedure would be the same. Section 34 is there for the, sorry, Section 36 is there. And for specifically international arbitration or a foreign award, you will find in chapter 2 of part 2. So this will be section 58 of the act, where the enforcement is prescribed. You will have to go through this, and in case when the court is satisfied that the foreign award is enforceable under this chapter, the award shall be deemed to be a decree of the court. Yes, as I said, it would be applicable in the same manner, almost the same procedure as is prescribed under section 36.
So there's a person, Tharuka. He's asking that many cases related to commercial arbitration refers to ad hoc arbitration. So what is its commercial significance?
Commercial arbitration and the domestic arbitration, there is no difference, as I feel. Commercial arbitration, in the commercial matters, almost in every trading agreement, there is an arbitration agreement. So I don't feel there is a difference between the enforceability is also the same.
So is it clear to you, Tharuka, what your question was?
Actually, I could not understand the question properly. And can you repeat it again?
Yes, sir. So he was saying that there are many cases where we talk of commercial arbitration, or commercial arbitration refer to ad hoc arbitration. So what is its commercial significance? So what is the role of ad hoc arbitration in commercial arbitration?
Sorry, I could not I could not understand that aspect. Commercial arbitration is the same domestic arbitration.
So he's
This
mentioning something about ad hoc arbitration. Mentioning something about ad hoc arbitration and its relevance to the commercial fora or commercial
sorry,
domain.
this aspect I have not examined. I have not come across.
Thank you, sir. So I also have one question.
Yeah.
That is whether there are some special statutes which define the jurisdiction of the courts. So there are special courts for a dispute. So will that disputes be arbitrable or not?
See, this is what the requirement of a dispute would not be arbitrable unless there is an agreement between the parties, because a special act may be prescribing such thing, but the arbitration is done only under one special act, and that is Arbitration and Conciliation Act, and the requirement is an agreement. If there is an agreement, then only the arbitration would be possible, otherwise it is not.
Yes, sir. So, are there any more questions from your side? Otherwise, we'll move towards the end of this webinar. I'll be waiting just for 2 more minutes, and then we're gonna be uh, going towards the end of this webinar. So within you have 2 minutes to ask your questions. So go ahead. So somebody is asking, is there any medium by which they can connect with you after this webinar or contact you?
My number is available with Mr. Rupam Banerjee, and you can obtain it from him. I am also on WhatsApp. If you want to chat, and if you want to note down, my number is 94251 56816. Whenever you want to ask any question, I'll be happy to reply. But the only constraint is I may not have that much time every day. Sometime I'm busy, sometime I'm free. So whenever if it is possible, I'll reply to you.
Okay, sir. Rupali, what do you want to ask? It's just written main role. So, oh, got it. Let it be. What is the main role of court in the proceedings of arbitration?
The main role of court. See, there are two things which we have to keep in mind. One, normally after the reference made to the arbitral tribunal, the court will not interfere in anything unless there is a specific allegation against the arbitral tribunal of misconduct that you will find in section 12 and the schedule. The other thing which is required to be done is the tribunal once passes the award, application for setting aside arbitral award can be made before the court. See, this is the first requirement, that once the award is passed, and you are not satisfied, you will have to challenge it before the court under section 34. And keep it in mind, it is to be tested like a first appeal. Of course, giving you full opportunity to produce evidence, as also making changes in the pleadings or bringing the other effects on record. That is also permissible with the limited provisions, but this can be. Then the other provision is section 36, enforcement. And yet another aspect is section 29(4), where the award, the time period is extended by the court to make an award. And lastly, the appeal to the High Court, or the, naturally it is High Court, because after commercial court, it will go before the High Court. So this is how the Act prescribes the procedure for the court. And this is how they are correlated.
Thank you, sir. So I think nobody is having any question now. So I would just ask Mr. Rupam Banerjee to present a vote of thanks to sir, and then we'll end this meeting. Rupam, continue.
Thank you, Anika. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes, you're audible.
The Amicus Curie family. Okay, thank you. The Amicus Curie family is really obliged to have you, sir, here with us, and thanking you for sparing your valuable time to engage with the law students in this webinar on the topic Basics of Arbitration Pleading of Evidence in arbitral tribunals. We feel really honored to get an understanding of the topic from your experiences and thoughtful ideas. Last but not the least, I'd like to thank the entire team of the Amicus Curie for pulling up this webinar in a successful manner. We hope to have more such sessions with you, sir, in the near future. Thank you once again, sir, for your time today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to assist you people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'll request everyone to deboard the platform now.
You all can now leave the meeting.